ate for 2 hours while his uncle hid in the tree line with a rifle, ready to shoot him for talking. In 1926, a 19-year-old Canadian named Gordon Stewart Northcott asked his father to buy him a plot of land in Wineville, a farming community in Riverside County, California, now known as Myra Loma. Northcott had come to the U.S. 2 years earlier with his parents, settling in Los Angeles. On the Wineville land he built a chicken ranch, with the help of his father and his 14-year-old nephew, Sanford Clark, whom he'd brought down from Bladworth, Saskatchewan under the pretense of giving the boy work. The ranch was ordinary from the road, a house, some coops, open country around it. What happened inside was not. Almost as soon as Clark arrived, Northcott began physically and sexually abusing him. The boy was 14, isolated, far from his family, and living under the roof of the man who controlled every part of his life. In August 1928, Clark's 19-year-old sister Jessie came down to Wineville to check on him. He told her he feared for his life. He told her Gordon Northcott had murdered 4 boys, 3 of them right there on the ranch. Jessie went home to Canada a week later and reported what she'd heard to a U.S. consul, who wrote to the Los Angeles Police Department detailing her sworn complaint. The LAPD's response was slow at first, complicated by questions over immigration jurisdiction, and the matter was handed to the United States Immigration Service. It would take until August 31, 1928, weeks after Jessie's warning, for 2 inspectors, Judson F. Shaw and George W. Scalorn, to actually drive out to the ranch and see it for themselves. By then, Walter Collins, a 9-year-old boy from Lincoln Heights in Los Angeles, had already been missing for months. He'd vanished walking to a movie theater on March 10, 1928, and his disappearance had already consumed the city's newspapers, in part because his father was serving time in Folsom for armed robbery and police first suspected revenge. 2 other boys, brothers Lewis and Nelson Winslow, aged 12 and 10, had gone missing from Pomona on May 16, on their way home from a yacht club meeting. None of these cases had yet been connected to a chicken ranch in Wineville. That connection was still 2 hours away, waiting in a tree line. When Shaw and Scalorn's car came up the long dirt road to the ranch, Northcott saw them coming and ran. He told Sanford Clark to stall the agents and warned him he'd shoot him from the trees if he gave anything away. For close to 2 hours, Clark held the 2 inspectors off while his uncle kept moving through the brush at the edge of the property. It was only once Clark judged that the agents could actually protect him that he told them the truth. Northcott had fled, and there was more to find here than chickens. Northcott and his mother, Sarah Louise Northcott, ran for Canada. They were arrested near Vernon, British Columbia, on September 19, 1928. It was there, in custody, that the case cracked open. Clark testified that Northcott, with his mother's help, and under threat, his own, had kidnapped, molested, beaten, and killed 3 young boys at the ranch. He also described a 4th killing, of a boy believed to be a Mexican national, that hadn't happened at Wineville at all but near La Puente. Northcott, according to Clark's account, had beheaded that victim and brought the severed head back to the ranch, ordering Clark to burn it in a fire pit and crush what remained of the skull. Northcott would later say he'd left the headless body by the roadside near La Puente because he had no other place to put it. Back at the ranch, investigators dug where Clark told them to dig. 3 shallow graves turned up in the exact locations he described. None of them held a complete body. What searchers pulled from the ground amounted to fragments, bone and tissue rather than the intact remains anyone might have expected from a killing ground described in such detail. One account from the time put it plainly, 51 parts of human anatomy recovered, those silent bits of evidence. That have spoken and corroborated the testimony of living witnesses. The reason for the fragments came out in testimony from Clark and his sister. Northcott and his mother, they said, had gone back to the graves on the night of August 4, weeks before Clark was finally taken into protective custody, and dug the bodies up again. They'd carried them off to some deserted stretch of ground and, most likely, burned them in the dark. Those 3 sets of remains were never recovered. Investigators were left prosecuting 3 murders with no complete bodies for any of them, working from a teenager's testimony and a scatter of bone fragments in soil that quicklime had already worked on. The case might have stayed a regional horror story, a chicken rancher, a nephew, 3 missing boys, if not for who else was missing that spring. Walter Collins had vanished in March, and by August, with no answers, the Lapt faced open public fury over their handling of it. Then, 5 months after Collins disappeared, a boy claiming to be him turned up in DeKalb, Illinois. Letters and pictures went back and forth. Christine Collins, Walter's mother, paid to bring the boy home, and the department staged a public reunion, partly, it seems, to bury a string of corruption scandals under a feel-good headline. At the reunion, Christine said flatly that the boy was not her son. Police Captain J. Jones told her to take him home and try him out for a couple of weeks anyway. 3 weeks later she came back insisting again. She had dental records to prove it, and Jones had her committed to the psychiatric ward at Los Angeles County Hospital under a designation used to lock away people the department found inconvenient. While she was institutionalized, the boy admitted the truth. He was Arthur Hutchins Jr., a 12-year-old runaway from Iowa who'd been told by a stranger in a roadside cafe that he resembled the missing Walter Collins, and who'd built the impersonation as a way to reach Hollywood and meet the actor Tom Mix. Christine was released 10 days later and eventually sued Jones and the department, winning $10,800, a judgment Jones never actually paid. Northcott was never tried for Walter Collins's murder. His mother had already pleaded guilty to that killing by the time prosecutors got to him, and the state didn't pursue the charge twice. There was speculation, never substantiated, that Northcott may have killed as many as 20 boys. California could produce no evidence to support it. What remains unresolved is whether Walter Collins died at Wineville at all. Shortly before his execution, Northcott sent Christine a telegram claiming he'd lied when he denied killing her son, and promised to tell her the truth face to face. She went to see him hours before he hanged. He wouldn't say it. "I don't want to see you," he told her. "I don't know anything about it. I'm innocent." Northcott went to trial in Riverside County in early 1929, before Judge George R. Freeman, charged only with the murders investigators could actually prove, the Winslow brothers and the unidentified boy from La Puente. The trial ran 27 days. On February 8, 1929, the jury convicted him. Freeman sentenced him to death 5 days later. He was hanged at San Quentin on October 2, 1930, at 23 years old. Sarah Louise Northcott confessed and recanted more than once before finally pleading guilty to Walter Collins's murder. She was sentenced to life at Tallahassee State Prison rather than death, on account of her sex, and during sentencing offered a tangle of claims about her son's parentage, that he was the illegitimate child of an English nobleman, that she was actually his grandmother, that he was born of incest within her own family. She was paroled in 1940 and died in 1944. Sanford Clark was never charged. The assistant district attorney, Loyal C. Kelly, concluded he'd been a victim of Northcott's threats and abuse, not a participant by choice, and sent him instead to Whittier State School, where his sentence was later cut down to under 2 years. Clark went on to serve in the Royal Canadian Army through the Second World War, worked for the Canadian Postal Service into his 60s, adopted 2 sons, and died in Saskatoon in 1991 at 78. Wineville itself changed its name to Myra Loma in 1930, trying to shed what the murders had made of it. Walter Collins was never found. The road sign still read Wineville Avenue, Wineville Road, the only things in that stretch of California that kept the name the town gave up.